The Long Way Home, Chapter 35, In the Teeth. The Long Way hummed. There was a mournful quality to the constant drone of her systems. There was a mournful air about her crew. Vi was overwhelmed by sorrow and pity for her two friends, for what they'd gone through, for what they'd lost. Isis Magdalene was shaken by her brush with prophecy. But even such grim portents shrunk in the face of the patriarchs and the right hand's devastation. Cadet was unsure how to help, or if helping was even possible for all his longing to help. Tondre was, for the first time, afraid that Jason's strength might fail him, that he might not be okay. Vincent was shattered. He spoke little. He spent his time in labors from butchering his skill to cleaning his weapons, whether they needed doing or not. Jason hadn't said a word, not even to Tondre, in the 8 days that they were in the safety of the hyperspace sea. Even now, he was hugging his knees, his back against the wall in a weight room, staring off into nowhere, waiting for the next flood of bitter tears to come. He hadn't eaten. Only animal instinct drove him to drink water, and he hadn't shown his face in the galley or taken his watch once since his retreat. Even so, Tondre, Vi, Cadet, and Isis Magdalene had come to him, singly and in groups, to offer their fumbling attempts at comfort. It amounted to naught. There was something insistent within him that stirred, that goaded him to recall his duty to them, but even duty could not move the crushing weight of grief from his shoulders. Jason did not know it, but Vincent had come to see him every day as well. Every day, the claws of his fingers brushed the door handle. His forehead pressed against the door. Then his resolve broke, and he turned away. Jason didn't know it, but Vincent was not turning his back on him. The old man simply couldn't face him. It was the same reason Jason hid in the weight room. He could not face the man whose son he slew. The door opened, and the scent of pan-cooked poultry wafted into the room, light and seasoning, since the herbs they'd gathered so long ago were running low. It smelled good, though. Jason's stomach grumbled. Jason's unfocused eyes blinked at the tall, shaggy form shuffling hesitantly through the door, and he realized it was Vincent. "The girls make me eat," Vincent somberly rasped, "but they say you won't take food." Jason found that he didn't have anything to say, and when he tried, the tears started again, and a broken sob escaped his throat. There was a scraping sound beside him, and when Jason cleared the tears from his eyes, he saw that Vincent had set a plate down beside him. He left it there. He could hear the old man sliding his back down walls to sit beside him, and worked to master himself. It was past time, for Vincent to have his accounting, his reckoning from Jason. There was a flash of reflection from the lights in the ceiling, and Jason saw a knife with a patterned welded blade, and a carved deer horn scaled handle in his hands. He turned the handle towards Jason and gripped it tightly by the spine with the husky words. Tears threatened to flow again, but Jason put forth a titanic effort of will to croak, "Don't deserve." "This belongs to you," Vincent insisted. I killed Cal," Jason whispered. "This belongs to you." With trembling fingers, Jason reached out to grasp the deer-horned handle and took it from Vincent. "I'm sorry," Jason sniffled. "Jason," Vincent seriously said, "please forgive me. I failed you." The sheer shock shook Jason's mind from its preoccupation, and before thinking, he stammered, What? I'm the one who killed Cal." "The grub killed Cal. It just took him 2 decades to die," Vincent flatly corrected. "Maybe longer. Besides, it's my failure. I'm bad at this. You'll have to..." A fledgling smile broke on Jason's face as he finished for Vincent. "Bear with you?" "Yeah, that. I froze, and you did what had to be done. It had to be done, Jason. I know it. You know it. It had to be done. It should have been me, and I'm sorry that I froze. I'm sorry it had to be you because I failed to do what's right. If you can't forgive me, I understand." "It was going to make him rip your throat out," Jason whispered. "I'm a fighter. You were in trouble." "I fought." "Yes, Jason. If we could go back..." Suddenly, Jason realized that he hadn't told his uncle that he'd forgiven him the instant he'd explained what he thought he'd done wrong. This carried its own realization that Vincent was correct. It had been Vincent's duty, and he had failed. "Forgiven," Jason interrupted. Silence stretched between them, and Jason looked into the pattern welds. The fact remained. "I killed Cal." Jason was drawn into a sidelong hug by the old man and said, "Thank you." Jason clutched onto Vincent and wailed, It hurts. It always hurts. But this... Vincent was something solid, something reliable. He had thought that there was no way the old man could accept him after, and he was so angry. "I'm sorry. It should have been me. I didn't mean to shout either," Vincent said softly. "I was hurt, and you were there. It wasn't right of me, and it wasn't fair." "I said forgiven," Jason snuffled. "I mean it." "Yeah, about that. It took me a while to, You know I'm bad with this stuff." "Aye, me too, apparently." "Hush," Vincent said. "This is a bit, it's more than... Mother of God. Jason, you're still a boy. Despite it all, you're still a boy, and it's too much for anybody your age." Anger stirred within Jason, but reason told him that Vincent was right. He needed to remember he wasn't superhuman. There were limits to what a boy, even a boy with his training and experience, could handle. Anger receded, and only the loss remained. And he spoke as thought that as it occurred to him. "But here I am, and nobody can handle it for me." "But you're also not alone," Vincent said. "And as there's somebody once told me, friends don't let friends kill themselves, however slowly." Jason's own words from months ago brought another fleeting smile to his face as he said huskily, "Thank you." "Another thing, we need to lay, Cal needs, I couldn't do it without you, Jason. We couldn't hold the funeral without our chief." "You only ever call me by my name when things are bad," Jason remarked as he dried his eyes. "What did you have in mind?" "Spacer's grave. We're already in space, so, and there's a viewport on the inner door of the loading ramp." "Aye," Jason agreed. "I figured, I'd like if you could find some words. You're, good at words." "I'll do my best, Uncle Vincent." "Now, eat," Vincent ordered. There wasn't any room for argument, so Jason picked up the plate, took the fork that laid across from the food, and took a bite. "Tastes like chicken," he said. Vincent had washed the body. He had cut away the silvery jumpsuit that his captors had kept him in. He expected it had some practical function, but the very sight of it disgusted him. He handed it over to Trundre and told her that he didn't want to see it again. Maybe she'd get something useful out of it. Maybe she'd put it through the recycler. He didn't care. Instead, Cal was dressed in some of Vincent's old clothes and wrapped in one of his bed sheets, wore a shroud. All of the loose objects had been cleared from the boarding ramp, and he lay in the center of the room created by its closure. Isis Magdalene had stitched a large cross on the portion that covered Cal's chest. Vincent stood at the floor with his little surrogate family just outside the open inner door. The chief stood to his right, Cadet at his left, while the three girls arrayed themselves in an arch behind them. All things were in readiness. "Kids," Vincent began, and scowled at himself, and he tried again. "Friends." But that, too, wasn't right. "My family." There, that was it. Yes, that was how he should start this. "My family. Let's start." He made a sign of the cross, and intoned rather than said, "In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, we have gathered here on this very doorstep of our home, of the Long Way, to commend our brother." His voice caught in the word, and coughed. The Long Way hummed, and he tried again. "Our brother Cal Freemus, to our Father's mercy. We stand together," and his voice caught again. The children waited in reverent silence. Tears fell at his feet, and 2 shaky breaths later he said, "As family forged through trial far from our homes, and we must trust in the promise of Christ's resurrection." He fell silent and made the sign over his fallen son once again, and the Long Way hummed. Vincent's mind raced, and showed him all the faces of the dead he'd prayed over as the years of his hopeless hunt had dragged on, and he counted himself lucky that he at least had this chance at goodbye. He didn't know how long it took him to find his voice, but when he did, it rang out with a certain command and a pleading funeral bell. "Holy Father, we commend the soul of your faithful servant Cal Freemus into your merciful hands. He was taken from us. His call, hope, denied him for long years. But your mighty hand has shattered his chains, and thus he returns home to you. Forgive him any sins he may have committed, and welcome him into your kingdom, where there is no sorrow, nor pain, nor chains." Once again Vincent's voice faltered on the word, and he rallied to finish. "But only the light of your love. And in the name of Christ, our Lord, Amen." He fell silent, and once again the long way filled the space between his little crew and her hum. She sounded sorrowful and comforting at once to Vincent, as if she'd long expected a moment just like this. Vincent stepped forward and put his grave gift atop the cross stitched onto Cull's shroud. It was a crudely carved crucifix, worn smooth from long decades of devotion in both joy and sorrow. It seemed a fitting thing to lay with the hands that had carved them. He returned to his living family and silently patted Cadet on his shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. Only talk if you want," the old man whispered softly to his adopted son. The young boy stepped forward and laid a long azure feather plucked from one of his own wings. It had been wrapped in a crisscross scarlet threads, so it looked more like a cattail than a feather. And Cadet explained that even he knew that amongst his people it was traditional to give a wing feather to help the soul fly free. "I never met my brother," Cadet croaked, and he snapped his beak shut. He swung his head from side to side, opened his beak again, and stood silent when the words did not come. He snapped his beak twice more, clearly irritated with himself, and finished, "I wish I did. Fly home safe, Cal." He returned to the knot of living and leaned against his adoptive father. The chief strode into the domain of the dead. There was an air of precision about him, nearly a march, Vincent thought. He noted that the chief's red blade had 2 extra ties midway down its length, and found himself curious to why. The boy made the sign of the cross over Cal's shroud and began. "I didn't know my cousin. I never met Cal, except the once, and that is something I will grieve for the rest of my days, I reckon. I met his father, though. Cal had the kind of father who wouldn't give up, no matter what dark paths he had to tread, no matter how it tortured his mind, no matter how crudely it tore his body. Cal's father never once truly abandoned hope of finding him. This means that even though Cal was in bondage, God had moved to set him free, through the one who loved him best. Cal is free at last, though I don't get to meet him, but that's how it goes sometimes. Sometimes you do the work for somebody else's reward. I wear the cross of St. Aidan, Purefoy, the unbroken martyr, the man victorious in death." Here the boy wrapped the end of his long braid in his left hand and drew Cal's holding knife into his right. Tondre gasped before she silenced herself, and Vincent wondered what it meant. "But you, Cal, you were victorious in death. You told your father that he came for you. You, too, never gave up hope. Despite the worst kind of bonds, you never gave up hope. By my hand those chains were shattered, and your call home finally answered." The knife slid through the narrow gap between the hair ties and the midpoint of his braid. "Thus I send into the grave with you half of my honor. I will never forget you." The chief laid the severed braid on the shroud beside the bound feather and the old crucifix, and with that same near march returned to Vincent's right hand. Vincent was right. The chief was good with words. The immediate mourners had paid their respects first, as was proper, so Vincent drew his son and nephew with him as he stood aside for the 3 who remained. Vincent wasn't surprised when Vi scampered ahead to stand over Cull and say, "I love your dad very much. I'm sure that we would have been friends since you'd be as nice as he is." She left a printed seashell amongst the other grave gifts and made her way to the 3 who stood aside. She looked up at Cadet and told him, "You would have been a great little brother to him, I know it." The Corvian boy turned away to look at the ceiling, but she hugged his leg, and his wings engulfed her for a moment anyway. When they released each other, she told Vincent, "I'm sorry. I wish your answer was better." The old man bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered a quiet thanks into her twitching ear. Last, she stopped before the chief. She didn't say anything. She didn't get the chance. The moment she was within reach, she found herself lifted in a tight embrace. "I guess you know," she breathed when he released her. "Aye," the chief whispered. "You're a gem." Tondre tried to glide into the chamber, but the gate was alien to her practical nature. She stood over Cull for a moment and said, "Through your father, Vincent, you are a member of the George family. Through that adoption, you belong also to the clan Trill of the Starsailors. Thus, you too have a song to be sung at each meeting of the ships. We care not that we were denied your joy. You are ours, and thus we carry your grief. Jason, I think traditions must bend. Shall we translate?" "Aye," Jason said, and cleared his throat in preparation. Then Tondre began to sing in a soft and quiet language, seafarer's negotiation. Vincent clenched his jaw and tilted his head slightly to let his implant know that he didn't want it to translate. It was a slow, chanting tune, and made use of the mid-words hums and clicks that made it so hard to shut in that language. He tried to imagine how it would sound being chanted by hundreds of voices on a large star-sailor vessel. The idea stirred him. The chief adopted a similar chant in commercial English. May your soul sail swiftly home. May you join the great ships beyond. May the gates open to you. May your name be in the book. Your labors were unseen. Your trials were unknown. Your battle was unaided. Yet ours you are. Your honor is known. Your strength is here called. Your love is here felt. Your freedom is ensured. Sail now, Cal, of the clan drill. Sail to the gates. Look down to the stars and see. We here still sing your name and deeds. She fell silent and left Cal to meet Cadet. Blunt as ever, she said, If you wish to join in the singing at your first meeting of the clan ships, I will teach you the words. Cadet only nodded in answer. So she moved on to Vincent, who said, The same is offered to you. It is tradition to offer a piece of your home shipped to the dead, but such pieces cannot be spared. I'm sorry. Vincent reached out and gently grasped her lower left hand. She understood him, and lightly clasped her remaining 3 around it, and nodded. Then she moved to the chief, who she said, Jason, you should have told me of such a pledge. Since your father is not here, I would be the only one who knows what you did. Now hear my pledge. Your honor is my honor. Your enemies are my enemies. Your dreams are my dreams. I will forsake my stars, and shall follow whatever course you set, until one of us must sail the places where there are no stars. Tran, the chief gasped, a hand reaching towards his cousin. It is done. I will not allow you to pledge your honor to a cause alone. Now, should you break the oath, my honor too is shattered. Vincent could see that there was something deep here, and he could see that he had no place to come between them. Tran, you can still forswear. I shall not. You, of all people, should not ask that of somebody. You know where I'm going. Think of what it'll do to your body. Honor to honor, she said, as if that was enough answer. Honor to honor, the chief answered as if it was. I will guard this pledge, dearer than even the stars that guide me. Tondre nodded gravely, and knelt down to Vi, who clasped her hands and whispered to her softly. Isis Magdalene wavered, then went forward. She looked at the shroud and said, I have no grave goods to speed you away. Yet here are these words. Your side did shatter my chains and preserve my life. And never shall I forget my gratitude, nor shall I forget the grief at the knowledge that such was beyond our mortal means. Safe passage over the sands of time to you. Then Vincent recited a Latin benediction for the dead, closed the inner door, and triggered the boarding ramp to lower. A rush of air carried Cowl's shrouded empty house along with his grave gifts into the vacuum contained within the narrow bubble of reality around the long way. Vincent watched as his boy's body collided with the bubble's edge and was atomized by the ravages of hyperspace C. Thank you, everybody, Vincent croaked. Then he swallowed the lump in his throat before he said, That's done. Not yet, the chief said, and jazz started to play from the galley. Let's share a George tradition for Cal. It's time for the wake. It was tough for Vincent to tell whether he'd managed to engulf the whole crew in his hug, but it was a long while before he let any of them go. Some 2 days later, Jason sat in the dinette, pondering the distinctions between knowing, believing, and feeding as he ate. It was still a mechanical process for him, mechanical, and imposed somewhat by Vi's insistence, and Tondre's too, of course, for his appetite was still fickle. Hunger was more reliable than appetite, but even that base instinct was preempted by the girl's care. In addition to eating like a normal person again, he had finished the information packet. He told both Vincent and Cadet that the file name was his father's RNI service number and should attract immediate attention. Furthermore, Jason had made privy to Isis Magdalene's surprise project, as it was time for the boy's first fitting. He was a little disappointed that she had agreed with him that naval whites would be more appropriate than infantry blacks, but the shape and the cut seemed fine and neat, and now it was down to the fine adjustments. However, he'd been changed again. Vi hummed a tune as she prepared a cut of the, whatever the animal was, for dinner in a few hours. It was a jaunty tune, and there were a lot of songs that used it. He recalled the first time he'd heard that tune was in the company of sad lyrics, and though most songs that used it were cheerful, that first hearing had always stuck with him. The knife going chuck, chuck, chuck even went in time with the tune. Jason idly wondered why she didn't sing more. He'd gotten the crew going more than once. Was she embarrassed of his singing? Jason didn't know. He'd have to find out. Folks needed an expression, but he supposed that maybe cooking was her expression. Chandra sat across from him, watching, making sure he finished the lunch meal. He'd have rankled, except he knew without her there. He'd wind up staring at it and then let it go cold. She sat there, and he thought about the missing weight along his spine. Half of his honor to the hyperspace sea with a kin killed. A terrible good deed. He ate mechanically. Isis Magdalene was pinning a garment over Cadet's waist. A vest with the sash around his waist, with tight trousers that ended where his avian scaly legs began. They found some articles about traditional dress uniforms for Corvian pilots. Cadet had said that he'd have wanted to have something that reflected New Montreal instead of his homeworld. But the polity didn't have enough Corvians living in it for accommodations made for them to be noted in the Longways database. They compromised by using the colors from the coat of arms, red, white, and black. Jason figured that they'd make a city parade of dandies, all colors of clashing. It made him smile a little when he thought of it. It made the girls happy, so he didn't mind if he would look silly. Vincent was on watch on the bridge, of course. Jason had resumed his duties, but Cadet and Chandra had joined him in both of his shifts. Not both at once, since the bridge was cozy for two and cramped for more, but neither of them wanted him alone. The only time he was left alone was when he slept, and even then his dreams sought company for him. He dreamed of home. He dreamed of the Among the Startides We Sing when everybody still serving was on leave at once. He wasn't dreaming at the moment, however. There hadn't really been a good moment, and wouldn't be, so he said, "You're still not past your halfway." Chandra elected to ignore the comment and its implications to say, "Eat." Jason put a bite into his mouth and chewed. Once it was swallowed, he said, "I am eating. You have been watching me eat. You can still forswear. It does not dishonor you at your age." "Don't you think that we've all grown up a little too much, a little too soon?" she retorted. Jason looked at his cousin and was struck by the fact that he hadn't thought of her as little Chandra in months. He realized that she, too, was shouldering burdens not meant for a girl, but rather a woman. "I don't get it," Cadet said from beneath the exacting fashion ministrations of Isis Magdalene. "Jason has sent half his honor to one he slew to save," Chandra stated, as if that would explain anything. They did not, as Jason saw, since Vi asked, "Huh?" from the kitchen. Jason took a breath to explain, but Chandra realized her mistake and said, "We have many traditions and rites from before the accidental adoption by our peoples, and some of them are around dealing with the things such as consumptives, as they were called, or grubs, like we say now. Sometimes there is nothing to do for somebody but cut their certain death short. Infection is one reason. I'm sure my dad could tell us another. In many cases, the hand that did this thing feels heavy with, I don't know, maybe duty? Something like that. Duty. To send half of your honor along with the dead to sail where there are no stars means that you shall consider yourself disgraced and cast out unless you labor to avenge isn't the right word. To make right. To make what happened right. Jason will make this right by ending the threat of infection to all others." "So when you sent those things in the, so when you," Cadet tried to ask before trailing off. "She promised to work towards the same cause as I do, in the way I do. It is Trad, I know you love me. You don't need to do this." Chandra opened her mouth to answer, but the long way shuddered, and Vincent's voice came roaring out of the speakers. "Get strapped in 5 minutes ago. We just got grab spiked. Cadet, to me." Vincent found himself thanking God that the chief had been running the kids through emergency response drills long before their encounter with his long-lost son. He had little doubt that without those drills, Cadet wouldn't be strapping himself into the co-pilot seat beside him. "The grubs?" Cadet asked as he started manning the sensor readouts. Vincent banked hard to the left and nosed down for a few seconds before pulling up. The missile that was on their tail streaked under their belly and veered off to the right before it started to circle back. "If they're grubs, then they're in an old Marquis ship," he snapped before keying the intercom to the engine room. "Tran, you got in there yet?" "Aye, sir," she chimed in from the intercom. "More speed? You know it," Vincent said as he pulled the long way into a tight loop. "We have interceptors right on top of us," Cadet reported. "I noticed," Vincent growled as he banked hard to the right at the apex of his roll. "They're using lasers and tiny bullets?" "Shield breaking," Vincent said, as the feeling of gravity's downward tug was replaced by the raw forces of their momentum. "Free fall," Vi moaned as she hugged her tail across from Jason. He was a little upset that she'd strapped herself in there instead of beside him, but it was the closest seat to where she had been standing. Isis Magdalene's fabric slid and swirled on the deck like fog, and the raw meat slid from the counter to careen through the air until it splattered against the bulkhead between the galley and the fridge. "Don't worry," Jason said with the utmost confidence. "All Uncle Vincent and Cadet have to do is get us to MST from a ship. Way easier than a planet." Vi nodded and hugged her own tail tighter. Something flashed beside the splattered meat and cutting board. Jason's mind noted a sound of metal on metal, and Isis Magdalene said, "A mighty ledge to plant your feet on." Jason couldn't help but smile at the reversal of the girl's words to him in her terrified tantrum the first time she had been with him as they escaped from the enemy ships. "Aye, our friends are mighty," he agreed. "Pirates?" Cadet asked as he started working the shields. Vincent could see that he was in perfect sync with him. The boy kept the highest powered portion of the battle screens towards the interceptors hounding them. "Terran pirates!" Vincent spat as he sent the long way through a spinning spiral before he pulled up just before a pair of missiles made contact with the battle screens. "No explosion," Cadet reported when the missiles collided. "Or at least a very small one." "Engine killers," Vincent growled hatefully. He narrowed his eyes and dove to try and shake one of the interceptors. "If they're Terrans," Cadet muttered as one of his wing claws flew into the comms. Vincent was going to snap at him, not to not bother, but he managed both tasks anyway. "Faint FTL comms signal. We're in range for at least one relay." "Over the channel! Get the packet uploaded!" "Working on it, Dad." Jason was thrown against his safety webbing, but he reached across the table for Vi anyway. She reached out with one trembling hand to clasp it. Vincent was pushing the long way to her limits, and it was starting to put a pit of foreboding in Jason's stomach. The sounds of the unstowed detritus hitting, sliding, buffeting along the walls, the deck, and the ceiling didn't help his nerves either. On one of the home ships, somebody would strap on the grab belt and tidy up in the early moments of action, but they didn't have one. He was starting to worry about the cutting board clobbering one of the girls, and he lost track of the chef's knife. "This is the moment I saw. The lost son comes home," Isis Magdalene whispered. "Channel open," Cadet crowd. "Uploading now." "Good work, son," Vincent roared, his heartbeat roaring in his ears. "Shield generator's getting hot," Trondre reported over the intercom. "Are you two moving the battle screens around up there?" "Is that all the shield breakers get through?" Vincent responded. "See what you can do about the heat." "Aye, sir." There were warnings flashing and alarms blaring, and his son had his eyes on the sensors, on shields, and on the upload bar. No slave pirates, these. "They should know better," Vincent growled. There was a crackling shriek from the intercom, the battle screens flickered out, and something rocked the long way. She lost speed, and Vincent was thrown against his safety webbing alongside his adopted son. Trondre's voice came over the intercom, and she was screaming like a child who was watching her mother die. "Reactor critical," she howled. "Jettisoning." Vincent's heart twisted. His steadfast, sturdy companion in long years of forlorn hope, and in these 2 short months of joy amidst peril, had at long last met her limit, and been killed. Her systems went silent, and her ever-present hum left the silence in the cockpit forever. "It's out," Cadet shouted. "We did it. We warned everybody. We win, even though—" His voice caught as he caressed the yoke over the wing claw. "We won," he whispered to her. Thank you." In the galley, time crawled. The flashing knife spun through the air over the table. Jason reached up to snatch it from the air, but it brushed his fingertips. Its point bit into Hawaii's safety webbing, then into her tender flesh beneath. Her eyes went wide with pain. She cried out. Jason's hands were working his buckle with frantic precision. The long way suddenly went silent. The lights flickered, and she was jerked as something struck her hull. Jason was dimly aware the long way had just been murdered, but he was watching as Vi's safety webbing failed. He flew up to the ceiling with a momentum change and flattened himself against it. She was finally jerked halfway out of the webbing. Her hips and tail became tangled in the space her shoulders had slipped out of. Her blood sprayed into the galley and sailed through the air in cohesive globs. Jason's shirt was in his hand. It was pressing against his friend's wound. His heart went in his throat. Her back was not supposed to twist that way. "Isis," Jason cried, cutting the nascent noblewoman's name short for the first time. "Get over here and keep the pressure on the wound. I need to get to the first aid kit." "Dad," Cadet choked out. Vincent saw that he was crying. They're hating us." Vincent scowled at the viewport. "Put it up!" A human man, filled the view screen. His skin was dark as coal, his eyes black pits, his face bold, black skull grinning widely, a mouth full of malice. "A Terran would know better," Vincent shouted at him without preamble. A grim mockery of concern contorted the skull-like visage of a man as he asked, "No better than to what? To take what I shall? I am a pirate. Terran pirates are all like sand upon a beach in all places the twice-damned Republic cannot reach. I see you should know this. Your ship has CIP transponders, does it not? You pulled us from a sea with a grab spike here, when we were riding the Rimwood current." Vincent growled accusingly. "Yes, I had warning of prey. Pray that you give me that which I want. Pay. I'll see that every last one of you be beaconed," Vincent thundered, and the pirate only laughed at him and cut the channel. Jason floated in the head and flung things out of the cabinet under the sink. Come on, please have one," he muttered. "Dear God, let him have one." The tox scanner, the autodoser, its various specialization packs, the case of pill bottles, all spun in the air behind him. He clutched the suture pod in his left hand, and a second he found the wound kit, then thought better of it. He put it back and slung the entire kit over his shoulder before he resumed his search. "Praise God, Christ, commanding a fleet of angels with all the saints and martyrs. Thank you," he cried, as he found what he was searching for. He pushed off and sailed into the short corridor, then pushed off and into the galley. "Jason," Isis Magdalene said from where she'd placed Vi on the table. She used one hand below the table and had Jason's shirt wadded up into the wound on the other side. "Jason." "Aye," Jason said, as he placed the device, a full-body immobilizing encasement on Vi's waist. He activated it, and plastic sprung from the metal case and flowed around her lower body, and inflated, pressing her limbs and body against the inner sleeve. "It hurts," Vi moaned. "It hurts." Jason paused the IMCAS once her lower body was immobilized, and opened the wound kit. "Move aside, and keep her held down, please." Lessons learned at his mother's, Lieutenant Commander Dr. Bridget George's knee, kept his hand steady as he swabbed the wound, disinfected it with peroxide, swabbed it again, washed it down with water, dried it, and put a suture pod on the open gash. It activated automatically, and its nanofibers stitched her flesh back together in seconds, while Jason taped a gauze pad over the wound. And for good measure, he wrapped it in a length of gauze and self-adhering tape. Then a shaking finger resumed the process of the IMCAS. "Jason," Vi said, as the device fully immobilized her within its sleeve, I can't feel my tail. Will I ever swim again?" "Don't you worry," Jason choked to her. "We'll get you to my mom. Don't you know? They call her Fix-It George, because she can fix anything wrong with the body. She's a hero, you know." A whole family of heroes," Vi weakly said. "I hope she's half as good as you." End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.